Hello, Flossie dear. I've been quite excited about reading another Pippi Longstocking story. And this one is called Pippi Longstocking Plays Tag with the Police. I think it sounds a bit dodgy, but we'll see what happens. She really is rather naughty. Let's see. Soon everyone in that little town knew that a 9-year-old girl was living alone in Villa Vellicula. The grown-ups in town, both the men and women, did not approve in the least. All children needed to have someone to scold them, and all children needed to go to school and learn the multiplication tables. And that's why all the grown-ups decided that the little girl in Villa Vellicula should be sent to a children's home at once. One beautiful afternoon, Pippi had invited Tommy and Annika to come over for coffee and ginger snaps. She had set out the coffee tray on the porch steps. It was sunny and lovely out there, and all the flowers in Pippi's garden were so fragrant. Mr. Nilsson kept climbing around on the porch railing, and now and then the horse would stick his nose out for a ginger snap. "Oh, how glorious it is to be alive," said Pippi, stretching out her legs as far as they would go. Right at that moment, 2 policemen in full uniform came striding through the gate. "Wow," said Pippi, "this must be another lucky day for me. Policemen are the best thing I can think of. Except for rhubarb pudding, of course." And she walked over to greet the policeman, her face beaming with delight. "Are you the girl who has moved into Villa Vellicula?" one of the officers asked her. "Far from it," said Pippi. "I'm a tiny little woman who lives in a 3rd-floor flat at the other end of town." She just said that because she felt like teasing the policeman a little, but they didn't think it was the least bit funny. They said that she shouldn't try to be smart with them. And then they told her that all the nice people in town were making arrangements so that she could have a room in a children's home. "But I already live in a children's home," said Pippi. "What's that? Has it already been arranged?" asked one of the officers. "Where is this children's home?" "Here," said Pippi proudly. "I'm a child, and this is my home, so it's a children's home. And I have a room here, plenty of room." "My dear child," said the policeman with a smile, "you don't understand. You have to go to a real children's home where someone can look after you." "Are horses allowed in your children's home?" asked Pippi. "No, of course not," said the officer. "I was afraid of that," said Pippi, sounding rather gloomy. "Well, what about monkeys?" "Certainly not. I'm sure you realise that." "I see," said Pippi. "Then you're going to have to look for somewhere else to find kids for your children's home. I have no intention of moving there." "But don't you realise that you have to go to school?" said the policeman. "Why do I have to go to school?" "To learn things, of course." "What sort of things?" asked Pippi. "All kinds of things," said the officers. "Lots of useful things, like the multiplication tables, for instance." "I've been fine for 9 years without any plotification tables," said Pippi, "and I'm sure I can manage in the future too." "Yes, but think how sad it will be for you to be so ignorant. What about when you grow up and someone happens to ask you what the capital of Portugal is, and you can't answer?" "Of course I can answer," said Pippi. "I'll just answer like this. If you're so desperately anxious to know what the capital of Portugal is, then by all means write a letter to Portugal and ask them. But don't you think you'd feel silly that you couldn't answer the question yourself?" "That's possible. Occasionally I might lie awake at night and wonder over and over what on earth is the capital of Portugal. But you can't expect that things will always be fun," said Pippi, as she went into a handstand and stayed there for a moment. "Besides, I've been to Lisbon with my papa." She went on as she stood upside down, because that didn't seem to stop her from talking. She has got very long legs, Flossie, hasn't she, and very long stockings. But then one of the officers said that Pippi certainly should not go around thinking that she could do whatever she liked. She was going to have to come with them to the children's home right then and there. He walked towards her and grabbed her by the arm. But Pippi quickly tore herself loose, gave him a light tap and said, "You're it." Before we could even blink, she had leapt up onto the porch railing. With a couple of bounds, she was up on the balcony above the porch. The policeman had no desire to climb the same way, so they dashed inside the house and up to the first floor. But by the time they came out onto the balcony, Pippi was already halfway up on the roof. She climbed across the roof tiles as if she too were a monkey. In a flash, she reached the ridge and then nimbly jumped up onto the chimney. On the balcony below, the police officers were scratching their heads, and on the lawn stood Tommy and Anika, peering up at Pippi. "This is so much fun playing tag," cried Pippi, "and it was nice of you to come to visit. This is my lucky day today. I can feel it." After the policeman had pondered things for a moment, they went to get a ladder, which they propped against one end of the house. Then they climbed up, one after the other, planning to bring Pippi back down. But they looked a little scared as they climbed out onto the roof ridge and started teetering their way towards Pippi. "Don't be scared," called Pippi. "It's not dangerous, it's fun." When the policemen were within 2 paces of Pippi, she quickly hopped down from the chimney and, shrieking and laughing, she ran along the ridge to the other end of the house. A couple of metres from the house stood a tree. "Now it's time for a dive," yelled Pippi, and she jumped straight down into the green crown of the tree. She hung onto a branch, dangled back and forth for a moment, and let herself drop to the ground. Then she darted over to the other end of the house and took away the ladder. The policemen looked a bit dismayed when Pippi jumped, and then they were even more dismayed as they teetered their way back along the ridge to climb down the ladder. At first they were terribly cross. They yelled at Pippi, who was standing down below, peering up at them. They told her to bring the ladder back at once, or she was going to be in real trouble. "Why are you so angry?" said Pippi reproachfully. "We're just playing a game of tag. Why not be friends?" The officers thought about this for a moment, and at last one of them said, sounding embarrassed, "Listen to me. Would you be kind enough to put back the ladder so we can get down?" "Of course I will," said Pippi, and she instantly put back the ladder. "And then why don't we drink some coffee and have a nice time?" But those officers were awfully sly, because as soon as they reached the ground, they rushed at Pippi, shouting, "We're going to get you now, you horrid little beast." But then Pippi said, "No, I don't have time to play any more, but it certainly has been fun, I'll admit that." And she took a firm grip on the belts of both policemen and carried them down the garden path, through the gate and out into the street. There she set them down, and it took a long time for them to pull themselves together and get to their feet. "Wait a minute," called Pippi, and then she ran into the kitchen. She came out with a couple of heart-shaped ginger snaps and said pleasantly, "Would you like one? You don't mind if they're a little burnt, do you?" Then she went back to Tommy and Anika, who were standing there with their eyes wide, completely astonished. The policeman hurried back into town and they told all the grown-ups, both the men and the women, that Pippi wasn't really suited to a children's home. They didn't mention that they had been up on the roof, and the grown-ups thought it might be best to allow Pippi to continue living at Villa Villacula. If she wanted to go to school, then she could make her own arrangements. But Pippi and Tommy and Anika had a very pleasant afternoon. They went back to their coffee party, which had been interrupted. Pippi devoured 14 ginger snaps, and then she said, "Those two are not my idea of what real policemen should be like, not at all. Far too much talk about children's homes and Lisbon and putrefaction tables." Afterwards, she lifted the horse down from the porch and all 3 of them went for a ride. At first, Anika was scared and didn't want to go, but when she saw how much fun Tommy and Pippi were having, she let Pippi lift her up onto the horse's back too. and the horse trotted around and around the garden, while Tommy sang, "Here come the Swedes with a clatter and a clang." After Tommy and Anika had crawled into bed that evening, Tommy said, "Anika, don't you think it's great that Pippi moved here?" "Of course I do," said Anika. "I can't even remember what games we used to play before she came. Can you?" "We played croquet and things like that," said Anika. "But I think it's much more fun with Pippi and with the horse and everything else." I wonder if that's a bit like your horse ride, Flossie, except there was only one of you on your pony, wasn't there? Not three of them like there. Well, there we are. There's Pippi Longstocking for you. So I hope you have a lovely weekend with Mum and Dad, and I shall see you next week. Bye for now, darling. Bye, Zio.